Welcome to the London Property Podcast, your go-to source for navigating the complex and ever-changing London real estate market. Our digital marketplace provides informative and educational content from industry leaders through podcasts and videos. We cover various aspects of the real estate experience, including buying and selling, finance, law, tax, construction, design, and more. Join us as we delve into the latest trends and developments in the market and gain valuable insights from our panel of experts.
Hello and welcome to London Property. I am your host Farnaz Fazaipour, and today we're doing our market update about the British countryside, and we are delighted to welcome to the show Lindsay Cuthill. Welcome.
Good morning.
And Lindsay has enjoyed a long career in estate agency and is an expert in the English countryside. And I'm going to hand it over to you to tell us more about your career to date.
Farnaz, thank you. And I must say, it's a huge pleasure to be here. I've been in the business, in our industry I was counting it up before arriving, about over 40 years. Starting my career literally just down the road in the Gloucester Road here, in South Kensington, and through a various sort of, chopping and changing jobs as one did then, and perhaps even now people do it more. I ended up at Savills, and about 15 years ago, I took over the role of heading up their country house department, which was huge fun, a great change from the sort of London property stock. I think there was a moment in London where I thought, going back to somebody's house for about the third time and saying, gosh, I just love what you've done with the kitchen. But there was I felt there was a limit to my property enthusiasm for just another new fitted kitchen or a slightly improved sitting room or an even bigger, darker, deeper basement. And I felt my time had come to an end for that enthusiasm. So I was lucky enough to see an opportunity, head up this team, and started exploring the countryside from a property perspective. I was lucky enough to have a house in the country, so I was sort of getting to know all the sort of stuff that matters and is many of the reasons why people go to the country. And I now run this peripatetic life of certain days here and certain days in the country.
In that journey, how would you say that the countryside market has evolved?
I think that perhaps COVID was one of those defining moments. I'm sure that there were others over, if you go over a century, there would be reasons why people move and shift and the reasons for buying and selling. But in anyone's most recent memory, COVID probably is one of those defining moments. And it came about at the same time. I mean, you'll remember, well, perhaps you were more advanced than me, but I don't think I'd ever been on a Teams call. Yeah. And I think I'd sort of dismissed it as sort of, ghastly and terrible and couldn't imagine how it would possibly work. And then we all had to find out how it worked. And we all discovered that it didn't really matter where you were to be able to carry on in engaging with your team. And so, of course, particularly for perhaps at my end of the market, leaders of industry or very successful people who could call the shots. They didn't suddenly need to be in the office 5 days a week, and they saw that actually nor did necessarily all of their team. And so it allowed people to explore two lives and rebalance and perhaps spend more time rather than being a slave to Monday to Friday in the city and that dreaded Friday commute. I mean, I've noticed now that Thursday night getting out of London is worse than Friday.
Yeah.
Because people are able to be more flexible. And so that would be that most defining moment in terms of how people appreciate the country. And then you see from that the landscape of the high street changing in terms of there being more people around the high street. And that's true of London neighbourhoods as well, I think, actually. There are more coffee shops, more people around during the day because of flexible working hours. Obviously, one's talking about a sort of privileged group of people. Yeah. One has to reference that point. But better shops, better restaurants, more going on. And I'm sure we're going to talk about the Cotswolds because everyone always wants to talk about the Cotswolds. Yeah. It is probably the brand that is now recognised outside of the UK.
And also, I think it's a little bit liberating because the model was always there where, once people got married and had children, maybe the husband would come back and forth and they'd live in a bigger house and the children would go to school in the country and the husband would do the commute. But it seems like, it's no longer just the local thing, that you are getting actually international interest in the countryside. And as you say, it is the brand of the Cotswolds and these sort of Soho farmhouses and Beaverbrooks have encouraged people to kind of see how they can use the country, I guess, and then do it on their own. So would you say that there is a trend that you're seeing of the sort of typical Londoner now actually thinking, country makes a lot of sense?
Yeah. I mean, of course, the typical Londoner is not what that typical Londoner looked like 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, you just have to sort of walk the streets to hear more languages, foreign languages spoken, more people from a whole melting pot of the world, to know that London is this truly world city. And so consequently, if they are going to make their home here and they then start to explore the country, and probably through the sort of devices of the Soho Farmhouse, Estelle Manor, to give a couple of examples where perhaps, particularly if you're not brought up in the country, and remember that huge numbers of Britons who were born and bred here often would consider home to be somewhere else in the country.
Yeah.
But we all live in London. But, there's an expression of, well, where's home for you?
Yeah.
Home is never, South Kensington, really. It's typically, Shropshire or wherever it might be. So there is an opportunity for people to sort of explore the country, to put a toe in the water. I mean, some of us might argue that a toe in the water at Soho Farmhouse isn't very countrified.
Yes, you're not really throwing yourself in it.
You're not exactly going to get those boots very muddy.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's fine. And it is certainly, for those people that were lucky enough or unlucky enough to own a property near Soho Farmhouse 20 years ago, the values have gone up exponentially.
I can imagine.
mean, massively so, yeah.
So you'd say that is really kind of like the most expensive area as far as country prices go?
I mean, it is a hotspot. I mean, let's not underestimate, it is still some distance out of London, and there are really wonderful places much closer in that give you the sense of country, but perhaps I do recall a buyer from Switzerland actually calling me, wanting to move to that sort of area and saying, well, infrastructure was very important to him. I took infrastructure to mean roads, railways, schools. He meant Soho Farmhouse, Dalesford. The infrastructure of farm shops and nice restaurants was his important priority. For some connectivity, I actually use the train a lot, but I've got my head in the zone and I know where to park, and Paddington is not inconvenient for me coming in. I can work on the train in the way that I can't in the car. So for me, I tend to use that, but I'm lucky that I don't need to drag a suitcase with me. So once you get your space in the country, then I think for a lot of people, the train is the way to go.
And I guess once the train service, I guess, modernizes a bit more, because you do get a lot of disturbances and it's not as fast as it could be.
Yeah.
Then the reach is going to also improve. I mean, if we were to sort of fast forward into what do we think is going to happen with the country market, I know that some of our colleagues I have a lot of regard for, with their experience, feel that actually the country market might become the real market and London might become more transient. So I don't know whether you're noticing any trends that kind of show that.
Yeah, interesting. I think inevitably, particularly towards the top end of the market, and let's define what that might look like. And if we suggested it was sort of £2 or £3 million plus, buys you, except very close to London, really a very beautiful house from anything from 3 to 50 acres, perhaps, depending on where it is. So that requires a bit of a commitment. Buying a house in London, if you miss number 18, well, number 24 will probably come up, and what will be the massive difference? You don't have to, there's not a lot of heart in London. There's much more head, because everyone's sort of focusing on the pound per square foot and maybe which way it faces. But there isn't much in between to sort of, confuse you or indeed to sort of get you going. Whereas in the country, if you're looking at a sort of grade 1 listed Tudor house, 300, 400, 500 years old, if you only bought it with your head, you probably wouldn't buy it because it's a commitment. It requires you to really want to live there and to embrace all of that and to be prepared to commit to both money and time to look after it, I suppose. And we often say that you're just a caretaker for the next generation, for the next owner. But it does mean that people tend to buy these houses with a longer time frame in mind. Arguably people from overseas might have a different sort of view, depends how their view of the UK is. But if they're British buyers, it's likely that at some point they're going to say, this is our family home for the next generation. We want to be here for 25 years. I think beyond 25 years is probably ambitious for most people. But
and also in the country, you can't, going back to what you were saying, that if you lose out on this house, then a similar one in the street might come available. Trying to navigate that house hunting process is always the thing that daunts me. I remember saying to somebody, sure, I'll help you in the countryside. And then suddenly I was like, oh my God, I've just driven 7 hours, kind of educating her about the differences of the different areas. So, is there a sort of insider tip on how best to manage such a search? Obviously, get yourself a proper person to represent you.
Get some advice.
Yeah.
But before you get the advice, frankly, you've got to determine where it is you want to be. Having said that, one of the things that we've found with our new business, the Blue Book, is that a lot of our buyers are not very area focused, but are very specifically interested in a type of property. So if it's historic, they will look in lots of different places. That might be unusual. On the whole, people, particularly with children, will have a focus on a particular area. So get your area fixed, and you've narrowed the funnel immediately so that you're not driving from one end of the country to the other, looking at properties, which can be quite confusing because there are different value points, of course. Very close to London, higher value. The further you get away, you would expect the values to come down. But there are some hotspots, and Cornwall would be one of them. You can't get any further from London, but the prices are, not dissimilar to London prices. To find £8 and £10 million houses on relatively small plots in Cornwall and parts of Devon is not unusual.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's quite important. It's not that you're going further out and it's going to get cheaper. It's actually they all have their own hotspots.
There are some, if you want to go to the northeast of England, which is so beautiful in parts, but it's a long schlep to get there. I'm going next week, and I'm already trying to work out how I'm going to try and scrounge a bed off somebody halfway there.
Well, I go on walking holidays with my girlfriend, so every May we go to different coastal areas. So northeast is actually on our list of places
it's beautiful
to go.
up there. Yeah.
Now, the other thing, I can't help to think, in kind of medium term and kind of investment view. But I imagine that eventually, once we settle into the private schools charging the 20% VAT, that there will be an inevitable move of people considering country state schools as an alternative, because London's just so overcrowded. And, some of these schools tend to have, they're tarnished a little bit about, what could happen and how rough it can
the
get.
inner city concept,
yes.
yeah.
So I imagine that this will have an effect. And I don't know if it's too soon to see anybody considering these things, but...
I think it probably is too soon to know. And it will be very fascinating to see whether there is truly a cultural shift in people's approach. Because for a lot of people, I suspect that whilst it's perceived that there's a higher educational standard in private education, I don't think that the stats necessarily always bear that out. But what there clearly is a social advantage, for want of a better word, and that sociability that comes with the public school, and people from all over the area coming to one particular school gives you friends all over the country, all over the world now, of course. So whether people will still see the value of that and want to buy into that, and 20% is a big hike, but we're already into, in order to send your child to a public school, one child, I think you would have to earn 70, 80,000 pounds before you've put a piece of toast on the table, just to send one child to one school for a year. That's a huge amount of money. So already we're into a pretty privileged group of people. And I suspect that very privileged, fortunate group of people will probably continue to find it from somewhere. I think over the generations, one has heard this so many times. Well, I just don't know how my children are going to be able to afford to educate their children privately. And you know what? The schools are still oversubscribed and still difficult to get into. So I suspect that despite it, they will find the money.
I mean, I think we all remember, everybody, including our own parents, always struggling, trying to actually get it done. And it's just one of those sacrifices a lot of people are willing to make. Are there any government legislations that you've noticed having an impact? I know that there was something I read recently about succession, something changed in succession for agriculture.
Yeah, they are looking. I think one of the things that might, of course, we don't know yet any of the detail, and at the moment there's speculation about at the moment you can gift property to the next generation, and as long as you survive for 7 years, that becomes there's some tax advantages, exemptions, and that may or may not either that will accelerate a transaction, or it will slow it down. I mean, taxation often works in two different ways. I mean, high stamp duty deters people from downsizing, because although their buyer, in let's say they're selling for 5 and they want to buy again for 2 once they've sold, they'll pay much less stamp duty. But when they look at what they've still got to pay, they think, crikey, that's a huge amount of money. I'm not sure I want to spend 200,000.
That's something that really needs to change.
So, the idea was that it would raise funds to create more wealth, etc., more opportunity, more growth. But actually, it can frustrate growth, frustrate opportunity, and lower the number of transactions. So, we will have to see.
And the holiday lettings allowances have also been cancelled. So hopefully that means something positive.
Yeah, I mean,
do you think it's going to affect the local economies because they'll have less holiday homes?
Again, I'm torn, because I absolutely have sympathy in local communities that have sort of become these little, holiday hotspots where the sort of the bulk of people are there for certain weeks of the year. I mean, I think England is largely an all year round destination, but I can see that if everyone is sort of second homing it, great for the retailers for the time that when people are there, but in the off season, I mean, can that retailer make any money? Domestic help is great, but actually the further they live, if the village is entirely full of posh people holidaying, where do the poor workers live? So arguably there should be a balance. And yeah, I would say that I don't think I'd want to really live in a holiday village that was just a holiday village.
Yeah. Now on to what you've been doing now, which for me it's a great relief to know I can call someone and know that I'm getting the best advice possible in the countryside. But tell us more about...
And get hold of us.
And get hold of you. Yeah, exactly. So tell us more about the agency you've set up. So
Blue Book Agency, we all rather unimaginatively all came out of one of the big firms. I mean, and we didn't, there was no plan. That just came about, and we're about to make 2 new hires, both of whom happen to have been ex-Savills as well. That's more of a coincidence. the fact is that we'd reached the stage in our careers, in our lives, and I'm the oldest by nearly twice.
By a little bit.
By nearly twice the age of the next two,
Yeah.
my two business partners. But I think just by happenstance, we all agreed that we had sort of tired of a very heavy corporate governance in terms of how the businesses were being run. And actually what we really missed was being much more in touch with our clients and really, really engaging in that process. And so we decided that this might have a resonance with people. I think we've been surprised at just how well received that notion is. And we've enjoyed tremendous success. I still keep thinking we're in a honeymoon period. New kids on the block, people saying, oh, listen, these guys, let's give them a go. But, you know, the success that we've enjoyed in terms of people calling us to ask us to help them with their properties, and then the success, despite really quite a tricky market we've had in selling them, means that I think we've found a niche, and it is one that is concentrates on the right sort of property with the right client at the right price. And because we're a small business and we can neither afford nor justify running a book of 70, 80 instructions, which is what typically the big guys have to do because their business model requires it, we're kind of restricting between the three of us to sort of 20 at any one time, which means that you just get the service that you expect and you deserve. And that's been the great revelation to people that, I mean, look, it hasn't been, you know, we haven't been successful everywhere. You know, we've made some mistakes and we've got some things wrong. You know, we're the first to admit that. But we are having huge fun doing it.
But geographically, would you say that that's really quite a broad part of the country that you're covering? You're going to northeast now.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, people do say to me, they question the credibility of saying, well, look, in one hand, you're saying you're going to give us this devoted and personalised service, and yet, you know, you've got a property potentially coming up in the northeast and in the southwest. You know, how does this work? Well, if you saw my thing in the car as to how many miles I'm doing, and it's just what we're going to do. And so far, we are fulfilling the promise of that personal service. And we do have an ambition to be a national agent. And we are making 2 new hires so that we can make sure we're covering the ground in the way that we want to, which doesn't mean, you know, spreading ourselves more thinly further away, just being, you know, we're strategic about what we take on. It's got to feel right for us. And that's not in some sort of snooty way, because we're not particularly bound by price. We've got properties from as much as 14 down to as little as 1. But we had 2 buyers actually call us to say, Lindsay, we've looked on your website. Whilst there isn't anything specifically today that we think we want to come and look at, we're pretty clear that we want to buy a Blue Book house. And for us, that was
because you're already shortlisting what you believe as a product you want to represent.
It's a sort of curation, which is a very pretentious word.
No, but I agree.
They are just listings.
As an agent, to do a good job, I think you really need to believe in the product that you're representing. I think that's the first step. So
we've got to love them and truly love them.
Yeah.
And so we do. Actually, and as it happens, and happily, the lovely property, 99.9% of the time, comes with a lovely client too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also our job is kind of a generational thing, isn't it? It's you know, throughout your career you end up working for the parents and then, you know, the children, maybe if they're young enough, even the grandchildren.
Well, as I intend to go on for at least another 10 years, well into my 70s, I certainly have that ambition to get hold of the grandchildren, to start introducing them into the properties too.
Yeah. Well, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you about the property market. And the other thing that was a real pleasure is when I actually asked you, can you come on the show? I was half expecting you to say after the 30th of October. It was such a breath of fresh air when you said, you know what, sure.
Yeah.
I think we already know where we're heading, so I don't need to wait for anything to come and talk to you.
No, indeed.
Which was a real breath of fresh air, so thank you for that.
No, listen, you've been sweet to ask me, and I was delighted to come along. Thank you.
Lovely to have you, and we look forward to having you back again soon.
Look forward to it.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed that insightful discussion with Lindsay. Should you have any questions about the British countryside, we look forward to hearing from you so that we can connect you to Lindsay, whose team will take great care of you.
Thanks for tuning in to our latest episode of the London Property Podcast. Head over to our website where you can browse our exclusive network of top experts driving the market. As a member, you'll have direct access to our experts and their networks. Our award-winning content will help you choose the right professionals for your needs and make informed decisions about your investments. Personal recommendations are a powerful tool in connecting with trusted professionals. Let us introduce you to the right people to help you achieve your real estate goals. Contact us now to learn more about becoming a member and gaining access to these valuable resources, or joining our directory of experts.